Hello, everyone. You are listening to the C Squared podcast with Corey and Curtis. Today, we are here with Dom Lawson, metal journalist extraordinaire. He's worked for a number of publications, has an impressive career in the metal journalism industry. And first, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have you and looking forward to the knowledge bombs you're going to drop on our listeners today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm a freelance music journalist, so I've got literally nothing better to do. So, that's
nothing better to do than to talk to me, which is sad.
Well, yeah, but I'll take it at this point.
And so, for people who may not be familiar with you, or because we all know nobody ever reads the article or the article author. Like nobody ever pays attention to who writes it. Why don't you just give like a brief breakdown, like the nutshell version of who you are, what you do, the publications you've worked for, things like that.
Okay. Well, at this point in time, I am a freelance writer. I mean, effectively part-time because I have another job, but I am, a freelance writer. So I'm, solely working for whoever I choose to, really, or the reality of that is whoever wants me to work for them. It'd be
whoever
nice
has some money.
Yes, it'd be nice to sit around and say, "Oh, I can work for whoever I want," but that's manifestly not true. So I've been a freelance journalist since 2002. Prior to that, the whole thing started. I started working for Kerrang in 1999, I think. I was the news editor in the office at Kerrang for 2 years. Then I went freelance after that and continued to work for Kerrang for another 5 years. Then I moved to Metal Hammer, and I've been working for Metal Hammer in the UK ever since, while also writing for Prog Magazine and Classic Rock Magazine, both of which are under the same umbrella. And I write for The Guardian on occasion, which has the best, culture coverage of any newspaper in the UK by far.
I even read The Guardian here in the States.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that Anglophiles who want a British newspaper in the States are going to go for The Guardian, because it's not full of shit for one, which most of our newspapers are, of course.
Newspapers in general.
Yeah, in general, yeah. Spot the agenda, isn't it? Really. But yeah, so I've been working. So I've done bits for The Guardian. Obviously, as any freelance journalist will tell you, a lot of the money you make is from writing press releases and bios and sleeve notes for reissues and all that kind of not very glamorous stuff that actually makes the difference between having a life and being on the breadline. Because it's not a lucrative business by any stretch of the imagination, and it's getting, obviously for obvious reasons, it's getting harder and harder for people who started doing it when I started doing it, when things were very, very different. Other than that, I just waste lots of time talking to people on the internet, like weird Americans. So
well, there's a weird American and a weird Canadian here with you today.
I do apologize.
International weirdness.
Dom, I had a question just as a quick follow-up part on this. So now, okay, so you write for all these different publications and stuff like that.
Yes.
Now, do you have another job on top of that, or are you just strictly
until very recently, no. I managed to survive for about 17 years without scraping by. I've never been able to go on holiday, I've never been able to afford to buy a decent car, but I've managed for a long time. But about 18 months ago, I got a part-time job. I work as a domestic care support worker, looking after elderly people. I didn't realize there was going to be a global pandemic, so that was obviously a pretty kamikaze move at that point. But that has made me more secure financially, and so I can really focus on writing the stuff I want to write, and it took me a long time to reach that point, because your ego says, no, I can make a living. I'm really good at this. People know who I am. I'm well established. I'm Dom Lawson from Metal Hammer, but that doesn't pay the bills, unfortunately. I get lots of free CDs, but I don't earn very much,
You don't even get vinyl, all you get is CDs?
Oh, I get vinyl as well. Don't worry. Don't you worry about that. Yeah.
Perfect.
I was going to say, we have standards here in this industry. There better be at least a 7-incher in there.
Okay. So now let me ask you this then. So how did you actually get started as a journalist in the beginning? How does one go into?
I mean, lots of people have these rather kind of impressive stories about how they wanted to do it from a young age and kind of went to journalism school, or, you know, sort of did their own fanzine when they were 15 and all that kind of stuff. I really didn't. I mean, it was something that I knew I wanted to do, but I'm not really a very ambitious person. So if it had never happened, I wouldn't have shed a tear. I'd have done something else, you know. But the two things I've always been obsessed with have been writing and music. And I know more about music than I know about anything else. By a massive margin, you know, and I've always had a knack for writing, you know, clear English and stuff since I was little. So it kind of made sense as a job, but I didn't really start doing it until I was 26, 27. I mean, around the mid-90s, when the internet was beginning to be a thing, I had a friend who was a graphic designer, you know, one of the early web designers, and obviously he was making a fortune in the early days of it. And he set me up a little website just so that I could write reviews of, you know, of music that I was listening to, just like an online fanzine, you know, very early days of it. It sounds so passé now, but at the time that was an exciting new thing you could do, you know. And one thing I was particularly into was the death metal scene and Earache Records. At the time, I was quite obsessed with Earache. I'd followed them from the early days and bought everything, you know, and was a real collector of Earache stuff. So I wrote a bunch of Earache reviews, and somehow that caught the eye of Earache Records. A very lovely lady called Sarah. She was called Sarah Watson. I can't remember what her surname is now. She's married, but a lady called Sarah recommended me to Kerrang when they were looking for new writers. And so at the time I was working at the House of Commons in Parliament in Westminster in the library, which is my first job after university. And I got a phone call asking if I wanted to go and review Cannibal Corpse at the Underworld in London.
That's amazing.
While I was at work. So I was in my suit, you know, going, yeah, sure. You know.
That's awesome.
Damn right I do.
So it happened by accident. I didn't pursue it. I didn't do anything to particularly, you know, deserve a career in journalism. But I would say that I think it was evident to me before I started that I was going to be good at it. I know that if that sounds arrogant, I don't care, because it's true.
Well, no, there's always just that one thing you know you're going to be really good at. You just, I mean, it's not really arrogance, it's confidence. Yeah,
well, that's it. And even to this day, you know, I you know, I wouldn't challenge people because that would obviously go terribly wrong. But I say I know as much about metal, and I can talk as knowledgeably and entertainingly about metal as anybody, and I've supported the scene more than as far as I'm concerned, any other journalist in this country anyway over the last 20 years. So if some people think I'm dreadful, it's all right, I can live with it, you know. It's fine.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And so since we went over how you started, why don't you talk a little bit about your role with like Metal Hammer and Blabbermouth, and how you got going with the major, like all the majors and all that stuff?
Well, I moved to Metal Hammer. I was at Kerrang for all those years, and then I moved to Metal Hammer. It was a strange time at Kerrang, and the magazine was kind of, you know, from my perception at least, drifting away from metal a bit too far for my liking. I had a lot of personal problems at the time as well, and so I moved to Metal Hammer, where some of my friends were kind of heavily involved in the editorial team. It was like, okay, this made sense. And so really since then, I mean, I was kind of their number one writer for a good decade, you know, and you know, just writing a lot of features, like a lot of album reviews, a lot of live reviews, all of that stuff. So that's been my bread and butter really for the last 15 years. And writing for Prog magazine as well since the start of that, which is something else I'm very passionate about. But obviously, because of the way I look and because of what I was first known for doing, I'm the metal guy, but I'm as much a prog guy as well, really. You know, especially now I'm nearly 50. You know, it's like it's easier to be a Pink Floyd fan when you're 48. You know,
exactly.
With Blabbermouth, that was I have to credit Monty Connor for that, as we do for lots of things, really. Monty Connor is obviously friends with Borovoy at Blabbermouth. They've known each other for decades, you know, and I think Monty just suggested that they got in touch with me to see if I wanted to write reviews for them, you know. And he'd mentioned it to me previously, and I said yes, I really would, because it's a good platform, you know. And I didn't have a strong online presence in that sense, you know. I'm not a massive fan of social media, so I don't particularly want to be whoring myself about with a desperate look on my face like a lot of journalists do, you know. So I'd rather just write reviews and stick them on the internet, you know. And if people like my stuff, they'll come back and read more. And if they think I'm a dick, they'll go into great detail about it in the comments, and I won't ever read it. So it's happy days all round, really, and that's worked out really well.
I have a question, Dom.
Yeah, sorry, I just blabber unless you raise your hand. So
no, go for it. That's why you're here.
I didn't want to forget the question, but so do you ever get in touch with the people that bitch publicly about your reviews? Like, for example, I know Michael Sweet did this high-profile thing where he blasted you for the review last year.
Well, no, I don't, because
okay.
No disrespect to him, because I understand why he would be pissed off with my review, because I was saying that Christianity was a nonsense, So that's obviously the singer from Stryper's not going to take that on the chin, is he? Really?
No, not at all.
And one thing. I wouldn't talk to them, no, because I won't dignify their response. If you can't take criticism as an artist, then you shouldn't be doing it. That's part of being a creative person, is taking criticism. And if it's really out of order criticism that you think is ridiculous, then just ignore it. What is wrong with you? It's just grow up. I did it slightly childishly, but it's Stryper. We've been chuckling about them for 30 years. The first couple of albums are great, incidentally. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I don't like anything they've done, but I am also an atheist and I despise religion. So that does kind of, it does kind of spoil the experience of listening to a Stryper records,
Fair enough. Also, I think sometimes when bands do that type of stuff, anyway, they do it as a publicity stunt just to get themselves more attention.
Yeah, and they're entitled to. They're entitled to respond angrily to a bad review. That's fine. Just don't expect me to give a shit. I said if you want to know what I think, it's in the review.
Yeah.
Cool. And it's same for all these dicks that write underneath. I honestly, and I mean this hand on heart, I do not read any of it ever. I won't let that. I'm not interested. I told you what I thought in the review. So if you disagree with it,
Did you ever Dom? Just out of curiosity?
Yes. When I was on Twitter a long time ago, I would have responded then. Not so much to comments on articles online, because I haven't got the time, but if somebody had a dig at me on social media 10 years ago, I probably would have responded and ended up, in one of those pointless arguments, Fair. But the older I get, the less I need that, and I don't think it's good for humanity in general. So I'm quite happy to drop a bomb and run off laughing, to be honest. Because you've got to get some fun out of this job, But the one thing that really made me laugh about the Stryper thing was a guy sent me a private message on Instagram saying, "I really objected to your Stryper review. I really think you should keep your opinions out of your journalism."
The whole point of your journalism is your opinion.
Yeah, it's like, that was my opinion, that the songs were quite good, but Christianity is bullshit. That was my opinion. I'm not telling people they have to agree with me. I'm just saying that's what I think. And if that means you never want to read anything I've written ever again, then good, because you're probably not the sort of person I want reading my stuff.
That's hilarious. Like, how does that logic does not add up? It's a review. No. You're a known reviewer.
This is the thing,
though. Oh my God, people are so dumb.
Modern culture, especially with journalism on the internet, and I know you guys know this because I saw some of the funny memes that Curtis was posting recently.
Oh yes.
There are so many people who cannot write for shit, and they think they're music journalists, and so they perpetuate this idea that a review is a press release and a list of things that are on the record. A live review is a list of the songs they played, and then that description of Grand Funk Railroad from The Simpsons, the thunderous bass of so-and-so, all that kind of stuff. They think that's writing, and it's not writing, it's rubbish. But unfortunately, unscrupulous people in the industry put those quotes on their press releases and stuff. And so the good writers kind of get overlooked because there's thousands of these other people. Sorry, this is it's a real bugbear for me,
No. There's a way. I mean, half the time this podcast turns into just me bitching, so it's nice to have somebody else bitching too.
Yeah, well, it's. I've said this to lots of people over the years, that most people don't have to get up in the morning, go on the internet, and watch thousands of people doing their job badly.
Yeah,
it's like, I read these reviews where people write in the first person, and then I went for a beer, and then I did this and that.
Yeah.
And I missed half the set because I was having a shit, and it's like, well, you've just admitted that you're incompetent and shouldn't be doing this for a living, but this is terrible, terrible writing. Have you never read any magazines? Have you never read any like actual proper music journalism from the old days? And it staggers me that people think that it's the same thing. And a lot of it's just trying to get free tickets.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was just getting ready to say.
And that's fine. Yeah. I get that. We all like getting free stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have a gift for writing, why are you a writer?
Wow.
Enthusiasm's not enough. I don't want a doctor who's really enthusiastic but doesn't know the first fucking thing about surgery.
I'm really excited to perform your open heart surgery. Don't know what I'm doing, but I'm jazzed to be
here.
Yay!
I bought the shirt.
Let me ask you this question, Dom. I got two questions before Cora gets into her next question, which is going to be a good one. I know what it is. So first of all, okay. So now does that mean that you don't think that anybody should be writing reviews then, unless they kind of know what they're doing? Because I mean, I've always kind of had the impression that it's good to start and then kind of learn.
I think if you're doing something independently off your own back, or a bunch of people start a magazine, and you're honest about the fact that you're starting up and you're inexperienced, then that's fine. If you're asking people on advice, for advice on how to do it and all that kind of stuff, then obviously everybody has to start somewhere. And there are people who obviously have some talent that, if nurtured, would make them really good writers. There's lots of people around doing that, and there's lots of great websites. Metal Injection being a great example that wouldn't, when in the days of magazines, those things weren't possible. But they're a good place to find, to nurture people who can actually write.
That's actually what they did for me. I didn't have any kind of a portfolio when I started with them at all. I started as their social media manager with a writing degree and no portfolio. And they were like, okay, yeah, sure, write about some small bands that you like. Oh, okay, here, take on these news pieces. Okay, here, now you're reviewing albums for us. And they just let me grow with them.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, that's the way it should be. And it's fine. I get that anyway. The democratization of the internet means that anyone can start a website, and if people flock to that website, then it obviously it makes no difference whether I think it's shit or not. But the fact is that there are ways of getting into doing what I do where you'll actually earn some credibility along the way and a bit of respect along the way, and you're not just another freeloading hack. And there are people. Title. Yeah. Exactly, and and without naming names, there are people I know who are well known, music journalists or pundits or whatever you want to call them, who don't know anywhere near as much as they let on, but also that have been quite unscrupulous and cynical in their approach to it. So it's not everybody who makes it to the top of music journalism, say the top of music journalism, as if there's some wonderful place where we all get loads of money and cocaine. But it's it's not a meritocracy, put it that way, a lot of the time. So that makes it very frustrating.
Just as a quick follow-up on that, okay, so I kind of get the impression like you're talking about people that kind of like act like they know what they're doing versus real journalists that do know what they're doing, and that's kind of what you mean. You're saying,
yeah. And I think if you've got a natural talent for it, you don't need to go on a journalism course. It's about being a good reader, understanding the mechanics of how writing about music work. Not that you have to obey laws, but that the basic mechanics of how you do it and what works and what has worked for decades.
Yep.
As opposed to just going, fuck it, I know better, and writing a load of really awful, like, subpar blog bullshit. And check out my review, and it goes across social media because this tiny underground metal label that let this guy into this show for free, frankly, need any publicity they can get. Which is totally fair enough.
Clout, I think it's where they want to just be known as the person that's cool and who gets into the shows versus someone who actually.
There's always that. I mean, I'm sure most people who want to do it for admirable reasons and because they're genuinely passionate. But there are definitely those that do it because they want they want to be seen stood next to famous people in the backstage area. And those people are widely loathed in the industry, and we all know who they are, so it's fine.
Those people get fired.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So, before we move on to pitching, Corey, do we have anything else we want to ask Dom about this before we move on to pitching?
Oh no, I think the pitching bitch fest will be fun.
Cool.
Right, good.
I do have a quick question though about Twitter, because you mentioned earlier, because I realized, you haven't been on Twitter for what, 4 years now? How come you left? Was that just because of dumb comments?
Just had enough. It wasn't good for my mental health, really.
Fair.
You know, you spend so much time looking at it and responding and going back to check what someone said and all that kind of thing. It's like, what, you know, no, I just didn't need it. You know, I'm on Instagram. That's enough. You know,
okay.
I don't have a Facebook page. You know, I'm pretty antisocial. I don't particularly want to talk with strangers. You know, it's like.
Well, thank you for talking to us then.
Yeah, but if people want to talk to me, they can come and find me. You know, I'm not. I need a bit more peace than that, you know, and I'm so obsessed with music that I would rather listen to music than anything else. So that means that I don't do a lot of the things that people do online, you know.
No, that's fair enough. I was just curious about it. Corey, you want to switch into pitching gear with Dom then?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm sure you probably get like 1.5 million people asking you to write about them. So I always like to ask, what is the absolute worst pitch you have ever gotten, or the worst type of pitch you have ever gotten?
I've had some quite like aggressive ones, and I always think it's a bit of I always think it's an interesting approach to, you know, you're asking somebody, effectively asking me for a favor, and you get these kind of aggressive emails. Here is it's usually, I mean, this is going to sound terribly racist, but it's usually from somewhere in Eastern Europe, and and it's usually a black metal band, and they're usually very angry, and they just kind of send these almost threatening letters. You know, this is the greatest album, and you know.
And if you don't cover it, we'll burn your house down.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, you know, which obviously just you hit delete, you know, like it's just,
like, go ahead, burn my house down. I want
whatever, you know,
right?
Yeah, it's not my house, I rent, so you know, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, so you get some of that, and I mean, my favorite is really badly written press releases. That's my personal favorite, which I should keep them really and frame some of them because they're just spectacular, you know. And press release bingo I like to play as well, which is good.
What is press release bingo? What does that mean?
Well, you wait for the phrases that everybody uses, and you get it's like a drinking game. You can have a drink every time you hear the phrase "long awaited," you know.
God, great
or legendary. I've learned over the years that basically every band is legendary, which kind of makes a mockery of it, really.
Much anticipated.
Highly anticipated, hotly tipped. Yeah,
I have to that we have to do this because half of the people who are not long-term journalists don't have a clue about most bands, and you have to make it sound big band.
Oh no, totally, yeah. Hyperbole is hugely important to your job. I get that. Yep. You know?
I see legendary on things that have it's like a debut track of a band that has a follower on Spotify.
Yeah. You see, I quite often see it attached to really, really obscure underground black metal bands. You know.
Yeah, I see those.
Legends of the underground. I mean, literally. I'm sorry, but if you're a legend of the underground and I haven't heard of you, you're not a legend of the underground, and that's the end of the conversation. You know, if you're a legend, you'll be quite well known. So you know.
So, okay, other than legendary, what do you think are some too often used phrases for PRs? I want to learn about this, and since you've been around for a bit, I want to know what not to use when the next.
I tell you, it's not so much a phrase, but it's a device that people use, which I think is dreadful. Is you're describing a band and then you list some other bands that they're influenced by, and it's such a cynical, you know. It's fine if it's a load of obscure stuff or you know bands, really old bands that don't sound like the band you're talking about, you know, something surprising, but to, you know, say you're a metalcore band and you go, oh, they're influenced by Killswitch Engage and As I Lay Dying. Well, you mean they're a generic metalcore band then? Is that what you're saying? Do you know what I mean? It's like that instantly, I don't want to listen to that record because you just told me it sounds like a bunch of other bands, you know, like it's just, I get weary with stuff like that. Because it's used as a selling point.
Do you appreciate or do you not like when they put like for fans of?
That makes more sense. But,
okay.
But I only trust certain people with those you know, those
Yeah,
when
there's
those calls
really
are made.
only-
Like I trust you guys because I would see the stuff that you put out shows that you know the breadth of what we're talking about. You know, but other PRs, they've literally just listed 3 bands that they found on Wikipedia in the metalcore bands section, you know, or whatever, and it's just, you know, over 20 years, you do begin to pick up when people are winging it, you know.
Now, okay, so with the and by the way, we're going to use that little clip where you complimented us in future.
Yeah,
as like advertising.
That's going to be our ad now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Know what we're nudge, wink, wink. Now, where was I going with the question? I just forgot where I was going.
I don't know.
Okay, you take over, Corey.
Why are you giving me this? Okay, so away from the negativity, what is the absolute best example of a pitch that will really catch your attention and make you really consider covering that band?
I don't know. It's changed so much over the years, really, because these days, you know, I get emails or I get Instagram messages, or you know, or presumably because my details are out there in the ether somewhere. Occasionally, vinyl records turn up on the doorstep, you know, or you know, a lot of it's just about getting me to listen to the music, really. And so, honestly, I think I'm a fairly easy touch when it comes to pitching. Really, it's just a case of the band having a good name, the band having decent artwork, the band looking like they're not really bored in their pictures, you know, which is 90% of all the bands I like look bored in their pictures. So, you know, that's a bit of a sticking point, you know, but it's really just making that little bit more effort than the other generic bands, you know, just thinking about things like what the email that you send out with the link to your album on Bandcamp or whatever, does that email look professional, or does it just look, you know, like you just gone, here's our Bandcamp, cheers, Kevin, you know? It's like, that's fine, I might click on it, but if it came, you know, with some sort of design on the email, or, you know, a picture of the band looking cool at the top with a cool logo, you know, heavy metal's not complicated. I like big logos and cool names and guys with beards looking mean but not bored.
Define a cool name. What would you say is a cool name?
What would I say is a cool name? Cryptosis is a cool name. Cryptosis is a cool name. Cryptosis, you know.
Cryptosis, yeah, I like Cryptosis.
Do you know what I really hate is all those years of those terrible metalcore and like emo band names with like 3 or 4 words in them, you know, as I fell over and my trousers, you know, my house is on fire and all that kind of stuff. And it's just awful. I want a metal band to sound like a metal band. You know, it needs to sound like something that would hurt you. You know, that's the whole point of it.
With a logo that looks like it's going to jump off and stab you, right?
Yeah, and that you needn't necessarily be able to read properly. You know, like exactly. I think Sanguisugabog is a fantastic name for a band. It's a nonsense. But once it's in your head and you've learned it, it's brilliant. You can't read the logo, brilliant. That's fine, but that jumps out when you see it on the page, you know. Whereas there's a lot of bands with really boring names and boring photos, and you know that's it makes your heart sink, because occasionally you hear a band say a year later, and you deleted the initial email because they look so boring, and then you hear them and they're brilliant, and you think, oh shit, I should have done something about that. But first impressions are everything, you know. It's you know, I get sent hundreds of albums every week, you know, like, and not physical copies, I hasten to add, but but you know, downloads and streams, and you know, there has to be a reason for me to pick the 20 that I listen to, you know.
So I got a question for you then. So you post a lot of albums on your Instagram that I'm sure you do not have the time to review. Is that correct? First of all,
yeah, that is correct. Yeah, that's just what I'm listening to. Yeah.
I figured as much. So how do you kind of pick those? Like I know you our good friend James Delbridge's band, Lycanthro, which I thought not one of our clients, but just saying.
No, I love James to death. He's like, I call him my little wolf cub because he's like the most adorable little thing. I just love him to death, and I love embarrassing him because I'm like 10 years older than he is, so I really love embarrassing him about his age.
So
they're great though. That's a great record.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
How do you pick what you're gonna feature on your Instagram? Then I just picked that because we know James, and I thought it was neat.
Well, really, it's. I mean, I go through everything that comes in. I look at every email that comes in. I probably download 25% of it from the streams I get sent, and it all goes on my my iTunes or whatever you call it now. And so, obviously, I'm such a music obsessive that I'm always listening to something. So a lot of the time, I'm just listening to things that I already know for pleasure, or things that I bought on vinyl, or so a lot of it's just that. But most of the new stuff, it will just be. I don't know. I just kind of filter them out gradually, and one by one, I'll play the first track, and if it grabs me, I'll keep listening to it, and then I'll post it on Instagram. Sometimes it will be the second or third time I've listened to it, and I think, I should plug this, But generally, it's just I don't know. It's like an instinctive filtering process, if that makes sense. You kind of, I probably download 10 brutal death metal albums every week, and it's like I know they're not all going to be the best thing I've heard this week, so I'll either pick the one with the coolest artwork or the one with the coolest song titles, or or just flick through. It's just you kind of you get an instinct for what's going to be the things that are worth listening to, and obviously if the press release tells you things, like this band has a member from this band, or this is the new project from so and so, then obviously you join the dots. Being a nerd, that's what it's all about. It's joining the dots, going down the rabbit hole. Yeah, which bands influenced my favorite band, and which band influenced them. And that's the stuff that I'm clinging to as I get older,
Makes
definitely. And so beyond have a cool name and have some cool artwork, do you have any other tips for bands who would love to see their name on a major publication like Blabbermouth or something like that?
I mean, it doesn't hurt to say hello.
Right? Just talk to us like we're people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of an antisocial prick, really. But if somebody comments on my Instagram or something and says hi, or sends me a message and says, "Is it okay for me to send you my album?" I'm going to say yes, because I'm not a dick. So if you want, if people want me to listen to their music and potentially review it, then make sure you do it at least a month in advance of its release, because otherwise I'm not reviewing it. And just say hi and send, and I can give you my email, or you can send me a link on Instagram. It doesn't need to be complicated. I'm not some distant figure who waits for the CDs to be brought in on a silver tray. It's.
You don't have a CD butler?
No. I have a vinyl butler, but that's.
Oh, you do have a vinyl butler. Well, at least you have the vinyl butler.
It's just I'm just a nerd like everyone else. If I was some kind of cynical careerist, then presumably I might have risen to the top of editorial at some magazine and have some giant media empire. But I'm still at the age of 48, still just writing about records that I think are cool. That's kind of what I do. I tell people about cool records that they should listen to. It's not a real job, really, when you think about it. But
Dom, I have a quick question for you, because this has been brought up. I've seen it brought up on like message boards and stuff in the past, so long time ago. Like with Blabbermouth, some people claim that there's like it's motivated by ads and stuff like that, which I don't think is correct. Can you comment how you find what to review on Blabbermouth?
I choose what I review on Blabbermouth.
I thought so. Okay.
Yeah, it's 100% me. If I, there will be big. The point is that I'm their chief album reviewer, so I need to review all the big metal releases.
Yeah.
And the only reason I wouldn't review one of them would be if I'd already reviewed it for someone else. Mm-hmm. So that means that I review most of the stuff that's released by Nuclear Blast, Metal Blade, Napalm Records, Century Media, Prosthetic, Relapse, all the best known labels that, and because those are the major releases, in the meantime, I also try and pick a bunch of underground cool things that, and give people that platform as well. I personally, I think I do more in that direction than most people in my position would. Like I review a lot of underground death metal records. I review power metal and symphonic metal, and even kind of AOR style stuff, because I'm not interested in being cool. I can review whatever I fucking like, and so there's no real plan behind it. If people think that I'm that someone's making money from advertising, they're sorely mistaken because I haven't received any of that money. So, you know, and I have picked every single album that I've, you know, obviously there's some things I can't avoid. I had to review the new Gajira album, you know, like I didn't personally, I wasn't that keen on reviewing it because I think it's disappointing. So I thought, well, that's going to be a bit awkward reviewing it. But that's my job, is to review the big metal releases. So I can't, that's the unavoidable part of the job. Blabbermouth need me to generate traffic with my reviews. That's the reality of the current time. So I need to review, you know, when there's a new Metallica album, I will have to review Metallica, you know, and that's fine, you know. And I won't slag them off too much because I don't want anyone to break my legs.
You don't want the Metallica mafia coming after you.
That's it. Yeah. That's another interesting reality of being a music journalist, is the shady messages you get online sometimes, warning you off criticizing certain bands. And I'm not talking about Metallica. You know?
No, I get some shady messages myself. So I don't do tons of reviews. Thankfully, I have the luxury of only really focusing on the underground because we have another writer that handles all the big bands. So I feel like I'm lucky that way, but I get some shady stuff.
Yeah, that's it. But it's fine because I ignore all of it. I don't care. I honestly,
I just kind of laugh at it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like bravado, but I really don't care. You know, it's like if my job is to give my professional and considered opinion on a subject that I know a lot about, and if the end result of that offends you, then boo fucking who. Frankly, you know, it's an album review. Get over it. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
So we got to wrap up pretty quick, guys. Corey, what do you want to ask Dom before we wrap up?
I think we've covered a lot for people to consider, and obviously, one of the biggest points I think people should take to heart is don't be so sensitive about things. Don't take everything so seriously. It's not going to ruin your life.
No, like one bad review or one critical live review just means that person didn't like you. You know,
no joke. One of the bands that I manage has made more sales off of a bad review than they have any of their good reviews.
Exactly.
Because people felt so bad for that bad review that they actually they were like, no, I'm going to go buy this now because this person was so mean.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like some of those terrible review quotes that you were posting on Instagram, Curtis.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so self-evidently written by somebody who hasn't got a fucking clue that you can only take it as a compliment, that your music is so weird that it's bewildered this fucking moron, you know, like that's great. You know, take that as that should be fuel to the fire, really, you know.
And the best thing is that those bands made sales off those goofy fucking memes too. So it's like, I'm happy about it. You know what I mean? Yeah,
wonderful.
So, what else how do we want to wrap this up, Corey? A final question or no?
I don't have a final question. I'm sure. Does Dom have a question for us or anything he wants to say?
That's a good question.
Turn the tables.
I tell you what, just a matter of interest, I'm quite intrigued what it's like being at the other end of the tube, so to speak, when it turns to sending music out. How do you develop a sense of who's actually listening to stuff and who's you know?
It's easy. You know how we do it?
I know you can see on Horlicks and all that. That's. I mean, in terms of building a picture of, you know, where to target people, is that easy to do, or, you know, is it harder with some people than others?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, like, pretty much, you know, with the bigger publications, they're going to want the big bands. I mean, you pretty much that 100% of the time, and you get a pretty that. For example, like, I'm not going to pitch you a lot of the bands that I have because you're not going to be able to cover them at Blabbermouth, and I know that. Right. So you kind of get a sense of like what level the publication's at, what level the band's at, and you just kind of, it's a little bit of an instinctive thing after a little while that you kind of get into, right? So I mean, like, if you're an under band, you're independent, there's like 90% chance they're not going to get in Hammer. Or am I going to send it to Hammer? Yes. Do I think they're going to get it? Probably not. But you know what I'm saying?
And the other thing is, how much difference would a review on Blabbermouth actually make to an underground band?
I haven't had a Blabbermouth review, Dom, so I'm going to have to hit you up these days. But I don't know. It's hard to say. I do know that, like, we've had, like, the people that I've had on Blabbermouth have been for news, and it's been like Lindsay, Sarah, and like Rocky Gray we had on Blabbermouth too, just for news items. And it's gotten them lots of traffic. I don't know how it would work for an underground band. You'll have to show. You'll have
I
to
think
show.
it'd have.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it would have not necessarily like a direct effect on their traffic, but on their motivation more than anything. It's like a badge of honor for the bands to see that, like, that approval coming from the top. It's like a stamp of, you did a good job. You made it to Metal Hammer. You made it to Blabbermouth. You made it. And so it gives them that fire to keep going when we know all these bands that are underground, they're broke. They're not making a ton of money off their music. They're doing this for the sheer love of it. So seeing that stamp of approval helps them to keep going and creating more. I mean, as long as it's a positive review and not somebody saying, "Oh yeah, you're total shit."
Yeah.
But I think that kind of an effect is even more important than the traffic, because it means you'll get more from that band.
Yeah. That's it sounds terribly worthy, but that is part of the motivation. Is I just want to kind of, I know it's a thing I can give to people. You know, it's something I can do for music that I care about. You know, and I would never review an underground band and be heavily critical of it. There's no point. You know, that's just a kick in the teeth and no use to anyone. But part of it's always been the same for me all the way through, is that I want to champion the bands that are just below the radar, you know, because they're the one. There are so many great bands, and they quite often get kind of overshadowed by the thing, whatever the mainstream metal media is, you know, heavily pushing at the moment, like this non-existent new metal revival we're being told to take seriously. You know, there's so much great music out there that if people like me don't do what I do and like review those bands and give them the platform when I can, then the metal scene will suffer. You know, it's only one cog in the whole thing, but it's quite an important one, I think.
I agree, 100%. So any other question you got to fire at us, Dom, before we end off the podcast?
No. Oh, how's the new metal revival going in the States?
Honestly, it's actually really popular over here. I mean, it's the same as it was when I was. It's the same as it was when I was in like middle school and high school. That there's a lot of people who really love it, and there's a lot of people that are very vocal about bitching about it and trying to tear it down. But personally, I like Tetrarch, and I see the value of having, because that's like the one at the forefront right now is Tetrarch.
That's what concerns me, is that there's them, and Diamond's obviously a great thing, you know, and a fabulous guitar player, but there isn't a scene. Like, where are the other 20 exciting new bands? You know, like it's to me, it reeks of a marketing construct. I'll be honest with you.
They exist. We did a roundup of them, but they're not getting the investment that Tetrarch is, obviously. But I can see the value of having that, in that, you know, that band that exists on the border, just like Linkin Park exists on the border of the mainstream and metal. Having that band that can be in the middle to draw in new fans that will then dig, because like I got started on Linkin Park and Korn and all those, and now I'm into weird random French black metal that it's like having those bands that like pull in the new fans that would then dig. I see the value of it, and I honestly hope it'll have the same effect it did in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I sort of agree with everything you're saying, but at the same time, the cynic in me says that there's a reason why new metal hasn't been popular for the last 15 years, you know, and traditional metal, thrash metal, death metal, all those other things have never stopped being popular within their little scenes, you know.
True.
You know, and new metal was had some great bands, and then it had lots of really fucking awful bands, and you know, and which is why it didn't survive, because creatively it wasn't that interesting after about 5 years, you know. That, and I wonder whether this is just the fact that lots of people who in their 30s who loved new metal when they were teenagers are now running magazines and record labels, and you know, it's fine because if it's something you like, if it's something you're passionate about, it's great. But the last thing we need is another Limp Bizkit album. I mean, really, is that what today's, you know, tumultuous society really needs?
No, but we do need something that can bring in the new people, because nobody's going to get started on Cannibal Corpse. Like, I mean, as much as we would love it, most people can't dive straight in to something like that. But
I would just question whether it needs to be new metal. That's all.
No, not necessarily. It's just
I think I'm on a mark for a good
I see
band
the value of it,
into,
but at the same time, is there another way?
Well,
honestly, I see folk bringing new fans into the genre a lot, like Wardruna, for example.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And,
Hylung and all that.
And the Who, the HU, Bloodywood out of India, all those kind of guys who bring that folky appeal to it, drawing new fans.
Yeah,
I see that being more impactful.
Yeah, no, totally. I think all these things are good, really. It's the same as symphonic metal. That's brought in a lot of people who like kind of Disney soundtracks, and then they discover that you can see bands that sound like that, and it's great, And the crossover with pop, I think, is a really healthy thing on that side of things. It's just I'm a miserable old sod, and new metal annoys me. So that's that's basically what's happening here.
I personally it used to be something like back in the 80s where it was like at the cross, you had the bands like the Dawkins and the Motley Crue that were the stepping stones. That's my own personal opinion, but
nothing wrong with Dokken. I'm all for that.
I love Dokken.
Tooth and nail, come on.
I listen to an unreasonable amount of Dokken.
Yeah,
we're starting to get way off course. So I'm going to end the podcast by saying, "Party on, Corey."
Party on, Curtis. Party on, Dom.
Yeah, I'm British. I don't party. I tend to sit quietly and read, but Hey,